To say that one strike from the sky changed church history sounds like a legend. Until you open a map, see a round crater, and compare the dates with Constantine's campaign. Then we check out the rest of the stories that are usually whispered at the altar. A house that seemed to fly, ancient blood that flows, bones and gold, dark Madonnas, Antarctic ice with air from the past. This video will surprise you and you will want more. Hi friend, you are on the KirTop channel. Panagurishi treasure. This ritual bowl is part of the famous Panagurishi treasure, found in 1949 in southern Bulgaria. The artifact weighs 845 grams, cast in 23-karat gold. The diameter is 25 centimeters. Instead of the usual ribbed petals, the master squeezed out 73 miniature Nubian heads, arranging them in 6 concentric rings around a central recess for wine or aromatic oil. The bowl belonged to the Odrysian king Xuthus III and was probably used at banquets where the elite of Thrace demonstrated their connection with the Hellenistic world. The images of African barbarians played a dual role, exotic decor and a reminder of the king's power over overseas gold mining. A fingerprint from the past. During the Temple Mount sifting project in Jerusalem, archaeologists washed the soil removed from the slope of the Temple Mount. Among the grains of soil, a tiny clay bulla appeared, a seal stamp used in ancient times to close bags or vessels. The diameter is 13 millimeters. On one side, the inscription is clearly visible. Belongs to Yediah, son of Asaiah. The style of writing and carbon tests date the artifact to the end of the 7th, beginning of the 6th century BC, that is, the era of the First Temple. The name Asaiah is found in the Bible. If this is the same person, the seal could have belonged to his son. This means that the family of a high-ranking official was also allowed to do official business. On the backside, a fingerprint of the owner has been preserved, a rare personal code of an ancient official. The surface analysis was done using RTI photography, multiple illumination, then a 3D model for the relief of the font. The find is important because it transfers the biblical name from the text to the material layer and confirms the existence of the administrative system of Judea on the eve of the Babylonian destruction of the temple. Triangular shield. 20 kilometers southeast of Sofia, the capital of Bulgaria, archaeologists have unearthed a rare Roman watchtower. Its base is a regular triangle with a side of about 7 meters, dating from the coins of Emperor Caracalla, the end of the 2nd century AD. This is unusual for the Roman Empire. Most outposts were square or round. The question arises, why a triangle? The narrow top of the tower faces the slope. A blow from a battering ram or stone slides along the wall without destroying the masonry. Inside, they found a stone well and the remains of a wooden floor, rebuilt during the Byzantine and Second Bulgarian Kingdom, 12th century. Such forms are found only on the border with watchtowers. The Romans called such borderlines limes. That is, the entire system of ramparts, roads, and fortresses along the border. In Bulgaria, this is the earliest example of irregular planning. Instead of a standard template, engineers chose a geometry that more closely matched the mountainous terrain. Today, the tower is part of the Irvich Museum complex. It shows that Roman builders knew how to deviate from standards if local conditions required it. Where the Ark stood. Shiloh in central Israel is called the main sanctuary of the era before the Jerusalem Temple. Here they excavated the foundation of a rectangular building 31 by 15.5 meters, an exact proportion of 2:1 and a strictly east-west orientation. These are exactly the parameters that the Exodus describes for a portable sanctuary, the tabernacle, essentially a camping tent temple. Inside, they found a powerful partition dividing the space into 2 parts, the holy place and an isolated room like the Holy of Holies, where in the biblical tradition, the Ark stood. The main evidence is not in the walls, but in the number of victims. Over 100,000 bones of sheep, goats, and cattle, dating back to about 1200 BC. In 97% of cases, the right side of the carcasses is facing up. This coincides with the instruction of the Book of Leviticus, where the right side is given to the priest. This profile is not typical for a regular settlement, but is normal for a cult center with constant sacrifices. So far, this is not proof of the location of the Ark as an object, but archaeology provides what the texts lacked: precise dimensions, orientation, layout, and kitchen traces of the ritual. There are too many coincidences to see Shiloh as an ordinary courtyard. This looks like the address of a shrine that has been sought for centuries only in books. A Guide to Exorcising a Ghost. In the vaults of the British Museum, there was a Babylonian clay tablet dating back to around 1500 BC. Only in certain light did the engraved image become visible. The ghost of a man with his hands tied, led by a rope by a woman. On the back was a cuneiform text deciphered by the philologist Irving Finkel, a detailed guide on how to summon and then exorcise a restless spirit. The steps are as follows. 2 figurines are made of wax or clay, one male, the ghost itself, the other female, a companion. Vessels with beer, bread, and a wooden bowl are placed in front of the figurines. An incantation is read, inviting the spirit to take the treat and go away. After the ritual, the figurines are wrapped in cloth and buried at dawn, a signal that a new home has been found for the soul and it will no longer return to the living. The text uses the word mashkim, watcher, denoting a spirit that has not found peace. The tablet complements the idea of Babylonian medicine and magic. Treatment included both herbs and administrative actions with the world of the dead. The main value of the artifact is the combination of a drawing and instructions, rare for Mesopotamia. It is a visual assistant of the priest-exorcist, showing that 35 centuries ago people were already developing step-by-step protocols for working with what today would be called psychological trauma. City without walls. Near the city of Hradec Králové in the Czech Republic, archaeologists have excavated a Celtic settlement covering 62 acres, or about 25 football pitches, dating based on coins and pottery, 4th century BC, late Iron Age. The culture is defined as latin, a general name for the style of weapons and jewelry common among the Celts of Central Europe. There are no walls or moats, which is rare for that time. This means that defense relied not on a fortress, but on trade links. During the excavation season, archaeologists collected 13,000 bags of finds, bronze and iron brooches, glass beads, gold and silver coins, fragments of amber, high-quality ceramics. Amber came from the north via the so-called Amber Road, an overland route between the Baltic coast and the Adriatic. The peak of development dates back to the 2nd century BC. In the 1st century BC, the inhabitants abandoned the settlement without any sign of fire or raid. The probable cause was a shift in the main trade routes. Today, the excavation is recognized as one of the largest Celtic complexes in the Czech Republic and helps to understand how the economy could replace fortifications. Trojan armor. In the South Moravian region of the Czech Republic, archaeologists have dug up a set of bronze objects, including a rare breastplate dating back about 3,200 years. The plate measures 40 by 30 centimeters and covered the chest of an elite warrior. The surface is decorated with convex solar discs and a triangular ornament, symbols of power and protection. The Brno Museum team scanned the fragments with a 3D laser, then filled in the missing parts with a digital layer. The model showed that the armor weighed about 1 kilogram and the edges were bent inward so as not to injure the owner. On the inside, there are traces of organic matter, probably a leather lining. The breastplate was found together with a spearhead, a sickle, and several bronze rods. Such a set is rarely random. Researchers believe that the items were hidden as a ritual offering, gratitude to the gods for the harvest or victory. This is only the second find of this type in the Czech Republic. The previous one was made more than half a century ago. Bronze weapons in that era were piece production technology. The caster first created a wax mold, then poured in an alloy of copper and tin and polished the finished blade to a mirror finish. Therefore, each suit of armor serves as a signature of the workshop and confirms the high level of craftsmanship in Central Europe long before the arrival of the Romans. The meteorite that changed the course of Christianity. Abruzzo, central Italy, about 100 kilometers from Rome. In the mountains, there is a round lake called Sorrente, about 140 meters in diameter. Geologists believe that this is a meteorite crater. Radiocarbon dating of charred wood from the emissions gives a date of about 312 AD. This is the time of Constantine's battle at the Milvian Bridge. Swedish researcher Jens Ormo has proposed a simple version. A bright bolide and a dust mushroom cloud could look like a shining sign in the sky. Eusebius of Caesarea describes a vision of a cross of light, after which Constantine ordered the symbol to be applied to shields and won. Calculations give an energy of about 1 kiloton, comparable to a small nuclear warhead. The flash was visible from very far away. There are indirect traces in the archaeology nearby. A village deserted in the 4th century, mass graves in the catacombs, local legends about a star sun that split the oaks. There is no direct evidence linking meteorite to Constantine's vision. It is a hypothesis, but the coincidence of dates, scale, and visibility makes it one of the most convincing. A natural phenomenon could have become the trigger for the decision after which Christianity was legalized throughout the Roman Empire. Incredible work of art. In the 1990s, while excavating a burial mound in Vestland County on the west coast of Norway, archaeologist Søren Deinhoff found an object that had only been seen 24 times in all of Scandinavia, a tiny gold pendant from the Roman period around 200 AD. It was 2 centimeters in diameter and weighed a few grams, but the level of workmanship was finer than a human hair. In Rome, such items were worn as earrings, and in the north they were turned into pendants. The burial mound was notable for its size and position, on top of a ridge richly filled without cremation. Analysis of the soil and accompanying finds, such as glass beads and metal belts, confirmed the burial of a woman of elite status. The next day, Deinhoff extracted 2 more silver brooches. These are the clasps, pins, that held the dress on the shoulders. Similar pendants are more common in northern Germany and the Danish islands. Norway has only 3. Scientists suggest that the decoration came through marriage alliances between noble families in southern Scandinavia and the western fjord region. Modern jewelers admit that it is possible to replicate the work, but it would require years of training and large amounts of gold to compensate for the waste. An adornment for dukes. In southern Poland, in the moat of the ruined Kolno Castle, archaeologists have found a gilded silver fragment of an adornment from the 14th to 15th centuries. The size is 3 by 2 centimeters, a thin plate with a seat nest in which a purple amethyst has been preserved. Researchers Lech Marek and Beata Miazga conducted Raman spectroscopy, a method of illuminating the stone with a laser to determine its composition, and confirmed that it was natural quartz with an admixture of iron. Most jewelry from the late Middle Ages is found either in treasures or in burials, and in this case the items were placed there intentionally. Here the item was most likely dropped when entering or leaving the castle customs house of Duke Bolesław III Brzeski. The shape and quality of the processing suggests 2 versions, part of a round fibula brooch or an element of a crown. At that time, stones were selected not only for their beauty. Amethyst was considered a talisman, protection from poison and betrayal. Therefore, it was loved to be included in the regalia of princes and church prelates. When the blood becomes liquid. Naples Cathedral. 3 times a year, the crowd waits for the same thing. The bishop lifts a silver reliquary with 2 sealed ampoules, turns them over, and the dark mass inside usually becomes liquid before our eyes. This is the dissolution of the blood of Saint Januarius, San Gennaro, the patron saint of the city. The dates are fixed. September 19th, Memorial Day, the first Saturday of May, transfer of the relics, and December 16th, in memory of the salvation from the eruption of Vesuvius. If the blood does not come to life, Neapolitans perceive this as an alarming sign. In the chronicles, plague, earthquakes, financial crises are listed alongside bad years. Saint Bishop of Benevento executed around 305 in Pozzuoli. According to legend, a Christian woman collected his blood in vessels. In the Middle Ages, the relics ended up in Naples. The San Gennaro chapel contains 2 ampoules, a larger one with a brown substance, a smaller one that is almost empty. They cannot be opened, so direct chemical analysis is impossible. The church describes the phenomenon, but does not provide an official scientific explanation. Scientists believe that this is thixotropy. Some gels become fluid when shaken and heated, and then thicken again when left alone. Chemists have shown laboratory samples of blood-like mixtures based on iron-containing compounds, iron oxides, and proteins gelatin. When gently heated with palms and moved, they change from gel to liquid. There are also mundane explanations: the temperature in the cathedral, the constant turning of the reliquary, the natural aging of the contents. The composition of the ampoules remains a secret. There is no access for analysis. It is impossible to directly test any hypothesis. Why it works for believers. The ritual takes place in front of everyone. The priest lifts the ampoules at the altar, tilts them. The dark mass begins to flow down the glass and becomes lighter. The spectators see the process even from the far rows. For Neapolitans, this is not a chemical trick, but a sign of the city's protection. A healthy compromise looks like this. Scientists offer possible mechanisms. The church gives it meaning. Tradition maintains the community's trust. Altai mummy. Altai, Paziric burial mounds. Thanks to ice, the skin of a person about 2,500 years old has been preserved, and on it, almost disappeared tattoos. They were studied anew. Scientists examined the images in different lighting, studied the pigment, and reproduced the techniques on models. An unexpected discovery was made. The tattoos were not made by one hand. On the right hand, there are deer and big cats, drawn with the finest line with the correct anatomy. This is the level of an experienced master. On the left, the geometry is simpler and more uneven, probably the work of an apprentice. This is the first convincing case when several artists can be seen on one body. Pigment, ordinary soot, tools, a single needle for the outline and a comb, several needles on a bar, for quickly typing dots and shadows. This combination explains the depth and texture of the lines under a microscope. Incisions made during mummification sometimes cut through the drawings. This means that they were not kept for the sake of ritual. Tattoos were part of everyday life, a sign of status, belonging to a group, personal symbols. The lines on the skin reveal the structure of the Iron Age community. There are masters, there are students, and there is a demand for complex body ornamentation, which was important during life and not after death. Drone saw an ancient city. Romania, Neamt County. A fortified settlement about 5,000 years old was found in a dense forest. It is not visible from the ground. The ramparts and ditches are completely hidden by the treetops. Lidar, a laser that scans the terrain through the foliage and builds an accurate elevation model, helped. Drones flew over the massif, and a plan appeared on the screen. Platforms on the tops, closed lines of ramparts, deep ditches, stretching for hundreds of meters in places. These are not random embankments. Defense lines overlap the ridges, entrances are controlled, and terraces for housing and workshops can be seen inside. Such a volume of excavation work is impossible without organization. You need a team, a project, and time. Field checks confirm the model. In the sections, there is a cultural layer and charcoal for future dating. For now, archaeologists are working carefully. First a map, then spot excavations. Based on the shape of the ramparts and ditches, the monument dates back to the transition from the Neolithic to the Bronze Age. Fire, people, and dogs. Saxony-Anhalt, Germany, Gerstowitz area. Archaeologists have discovered 12 round pits up to 2.5 meters deep, dating from 3,400 to 3,050 BC. This is the Salzmunde culture, a local branch of the funnel beaker culture. The composition of the finds shows not an ordinary garbage layer, but repetitive rituals. The pits contain charred remains of buildings, intact ceramic vessels, and the bones of people and dogs. In one complex, a dog has been preserved anatomically intact, with traces of fire. A human skull was added later nearby, indicating that the pit was opened and used many times. In another place, a home oven was converted into a grave for 2 people. The bones show traces of cremation before or during the burial. Why dogs? In ancient beliefs, they are guides to the other world. Their presence next to human remains is logical for a rite of passage. The arrangement of objects and bones is orderly. These are not spontaneous burials, but structured scenarios with fire, dismantling of buildings, and partial reburials. The context of time is important. The end of the Neolithic is accompanied by climatic instability and pressure from neighboring communities. Crop failures and competition for land could increase the need for ceremonies addressed to ancestors and the home fire. Therefore, stoves and parts of houses are included in the ritual as symbols of community life. DNA and isotopes will help to understand whether these are local people, where the dogs are from, whether they were companions of one family, or were brought from different settlements. Mysore Electrician King. The Principality of Mysore is today the state of Karnataka in southern India. Its ruler Krishnaraja Wodeyar IV went down in history not for his palaces, but for his reforms. He ascended the throne at the age of 11 and began ruling fully at the age of 18. His personal capital was estimated at $8.5 billion in today's money, but his luxurious diamond collections went not into the treasury, but into development projects. The main step was the Shivana Samudra Hydroelectric Power Station, 1905. It was the first hydroelectric power station in Asia. It was because of it that Bangalore became a city with electric lighting before many European capitals. When the construction ran out of funds, the Maharaja sold some of the family jewels, including the diamond tiara, to complete the Krishnaraja Sagar Dam. He broke caste barriers. He banned untouchability, child marriages under 8 years of age, and introduced compulsory primary education. He gave a quarter of government positions to those who did not belong to the priestly elite and paid for the education of widows and disabled children from his personal fund. Mahatma Gandhi called him a holy king. Lord Curzon, the Viceroy of British India, noted, "If you want to see what modernization should look like, look at Mysore." When summing up the results in 1940, the British newspaper The Times wrote, "A ruler who is hard to find equal in the 20th century in terms of love of the people and efficiency of governance." Ritual cargo from the Philippines. Guam Island is on the western edge of the Pacific Ocean, 2,300 kilometers east of the Philippines. In the coastal Retidian cave, archaeologists found microscopic remains of rice in red ceramics. The age, according to radiocarbon, is 3,500 to 3,100 years. This is the earliest evidence of the delivery of a cultivated plant to such a distant island. The key evidence is phytoliths, tiny silica structures that preserve the shape of leaves and husks after the decomposition of the plant. A team from the University of Guam and the Australian National University examined the shards with micro-CT scanning and petrographic analysis. The shapes of the phytoliths matched Asian rice varieties. There are no tools for cultivating fields or traces of irrigation nearby, which means that the grains were not brought for farming. Researchers are leaning towards the version of ritual baggage. Rice could have been used in rituals or as a symbol of connection with the homeland of the settlers. This is the only pre-European use of rice in the Mariana Islands. The plant would not appear on other remote atolls for 2,000 years. The find confirms that the first Pacific explorers did not drift with the currents, but planned their route and carried elements of culture with them, even if they could not be grown on the new shore. Flying house. In the Italian Loreto, Marche region, everyone is shown the Holy House, 3 stone walls that, according to legend, angels moved from Nazareth at the end of the 13th century. The route in the legend is detailed. First, the house landed on the Tursat Hill, now a district of Rijeka in Croatia, in 1291, then in 1294 it ended up at Recanati, and after several moves it took its current place on the ridge of Loreto. Hence the name, flying. Judging by the house itself, it is not local. The stone and the binding solution are the same as those used in Palestine in the 13th century. On the blocks there are pilgrim crosses and scratched inscriptions typical of the Holy Land. The house stands directly on the ground without a foundation, as if it was brought with ready-made walls and simply erected. The dimensions of the room fit into those that medieval descriptions attribute to the House of Mary in Nazareth. And now about how it could have ended up in Italy. After the fall of Acre in 1291, the Crusaders and the merchants associated with them took the relics by sea, saving them from destruction. The surname Angeli, the dynasty of the Byzantine angels, appears in documents of that time. The version is simple and beautiful. The angels who paid for the transportation eventually turned into the angels who moved the house. The movements near Recanati are also explained in a mundane way. The shrine was moved several times, first to private plots, then to a neutral site, until it was built into the current stone box of the basilica. Where is the boundary between mysticism and history? The church accepts a wonderful tradition, and this is how millions of pilgrims experience it. Archaeologists and historians are more cautious. The material and technology point to Palestine and traces of montage to real transportation in parts in the 13th century. In the 20th century, Our Lady of Loreto became the patroness of aviation, symbolic for a shrine that flew. Warning at the entrance. In the ancient port of Olympos on the southern coast of Turkey in Antalya province, archaeologists have uncovered a mosaic floor of the early Christian church number 1, dating back to the 5th century AD. On the threshold is a Greek inscription, "Only those who are on the righteous path may enter here." The short phrase served as a kind of check on the conscience of parishioners before they crossed the threshold. The mosaic is made of limestone and glass cubes measuring 8 to 10 millimeters. The design is stylized vines and palmettes, a popular motif in the Eastern Roman Empire. In the corners of the field are the names of the founders, wealthy citizens who paid for the work. This helps to understand the social composition of Olympos in late antiquity. The presence of sponsors indicates the wealth of the trading city. Below the mosaic, large pithoi clay vessels were found embedded in the floor to store grain and oil, a sign that the temple also served as a food warehouse for the community. The city itself was abandoned in the 12th century. The inscription has not been seen since. The discovery provides an example of how church architecture combined worship and economic tasks, with short texts at the entrance acting as a simple but clear access system for believers. The Sumerian myth of the trickster. In the vaults of the British Museum, there was an inconspicuous clay tablet Ni 12501 from the city of Nippur, modern Iraq. Age, about 4,400 years, early dynastic Sumer. Recently, Assyriologist Jana Matusak deciphered the text in a drawing visible only under oblique light. This is a fragment of a myth where the main characters are the god ruler Enlil, his son, the god of thunder Ishkur, and a fox messenger. According to the plot, Ishkur ends up in the underworld. On Earth, rain disappears, the harvest fades. Enlil convenes a meeting of the gods, but no one wants to go down for the prisoner. The fox volunteers, a small but agile creature. In the picture, he goes forward with his paws tied, a convention showing a willingness to take risks. The continuation on the other tablet has not yet been found, but the surviving lines describe how the fox deceives the lords of the dungeon, pretending to drink their wine, but in fact hiding it in a jug, distracting the guards and bringing Ishkur to the light. The story is one of the oldest examples of a trickster, a hero who uses his wits where force is powerless. The tablet is important in two respects at once. It records the connection between climate fears and the weather gods and shows that the image of a cunning fox already served as a lesson in the power of the mind. Books on human skin. In the 19th century, there was a rare but real practice in Europe and the USA. Books were bound in human skin. Experts call it anthropodermic bibliopegy, literally a book covered with a person. Most often, the skin was taken from executed criminals or patients in anatomical theaters. 1837, Boston, USA. The robber James Allen bequeathed his skin after his death and bound his own memoirs. On the cover is written in Latin, "This book is made from Allen's skin." 1830, Devon, England. Pied Piper. George Cudmore poisoned his wife. After his execution, his skin was used to make a collection of John Milton's poetry. 1882, France. A countess who died of tuberculosis bequeathed to the astronomy fanatic Camille Flammarion to use her skin for the first copy of his book, Terre du Ciel. And now about entire collections. The Harvard Library in the U.S. holds at least 3 volumes in such a binding. One 17th century treatise contains a note about Jonas Wright, who was skinned on August 4, 1632. The John Hay Library in London confirms a medical atlas by Vesalius with a brown human cover. The motives varied: the memory of a crime, the rarity of a souvenir, scientific interest. Legally, it was in a gray area. The bodies of criminals were often given to surgical schools, and the waste was used for skin. These bindings are not put on display, but they are not destroyed either. Institutions consider them historical artifacts demonstrating how far they could go in search of a unique edition. Skeletons and jewels. Imagine an altar in a Bavarian church. In a glass sarcophagus lies a skeleton strewn with gold, stones, lace, and even a wig. This is not an installation, but a shrine of the Baroque era. In the 17th to 18th centuries, ancient bones were taken out of the Roman catacombs en masse and turned into shining patrons of cities in Germany and Switzerland. This was the Catholic world's response to the Reformation, where many relics were lost. A strong visual gesture was needed that would unite the community and bring back pilgrims. How it was done. Rome issued papers about the authenticity of the bones, essentially a certificate that the remains were indeed from the catacombs. A new name was often given, for example Valentine or Candide. On site, the bones were assembled into a single image. Missing parts were supplemented with wood and wax, glass eyes were put on the skull, silk and lace were put on top. The gold and stones were sewn on by nuns. The result was a shining heavenly warrior in a gilded casket at the side altar. It worked in three planes at once. Faith, the city had its own patron saint. Politics, the Counter-Reformation showed the richness of the Catholic tradition without lengthy debates. Economy, the temple became a center of pilgrimage. What about authenticity? Radiocarbon tests for some of these saints give the 1st to 3rd centuries, which means the bones themselves are truly ancient. Martyrdom is not always provable, and the jewelry shell was entirely made by workshops. During the Enlightenment, many figures were put away in storerooms. Today, they are gradually being restored and shown as monuments of faith and art at the same time. The result is simple. Before us is not a cheap fake and not a pure miracle, but a rare fusion of a religious idea. Baroque taste and urban identity. What do we see in the altar window? A shrine, an instrument of the era, or a Baroque show? It seems like everything happened at once, which is why these skeletons still attract attention and questions. Champagne at the bottom of the sea. May diving off the Polish Hel Peninsula, Gdansk Bay, brought a double discovery. At a depth of 60 to 70 meters, Baltic Tech specialists, instead of the sought-after submarine from the Second World War, came across two 18th century sailing ships lying 2 kilometers from each other. The first ship is loaded with green glass bottles and stone jugs. Analysis of the liquid is still ahead, but based on experience from previous salvages, some of the bottles probably contain champagne and natural mineral water seltzers. Then it was considered almost a medicine and was supplied to the royal courts, including St. Petersburg. The second ship was built a little later at the end of the 18th century. The hull is well preserved. Low temperatures and weak currents of the Baltic slow down the decomposition of the wood. Both objects are located directly under a modern shipping route, so raising to the surface is unlikely. Archaeologists will work with robots and photogrammetry. The find confirms the vibrant Baltic Northern Europe-Russia trade long before steamships and shows that the shallow seabed remains an archive where commercial voyages become time capsules. Ice, 1.2 million years old. In the laboratory of the Alfred Wegener Institute, Bremerhaven, Germany, scientists are cutting up the oldest ice core on Earth, a cylinder 10 centimeters in diameter and 2.8 kilometers long, raised from a height of 3,200 meters at the Concordia Station, Antarctica. Radioisotope dating indicates an age of more than 1.2 million years. This is twice as old as the previous record holder Epocha, 800,000 years. The atmosphere of the past is preserved in air bubbles. Glaciologists want to understand why the rhythm of glaciers changed a million years ago. Instead of cycles every 41,000 years, the Earth switched to a periodicity of about 100,000 years. Comparison of concentrations of CO2, methane, and dust will provide direct data on the relationship between greenhouse gases and temperature. And here's an unexpected bonus. At the basal mark, the drill broke through a thin layer of ice and pulled out a chunk of granite, likely the upper edge of the Antarctic basement. Geologists will have a chance to date when the continent was covered in ice. The first results will be available in a year. This core will give scientists a long line of history and make climate models more accurate when it comes to CO2 growth. Black Madonnas. All over Europe, there are icons and statues of the Virgin Mary with a very dark face. They are visited by the thousands. There are several reasons, and they are different for each image. In old churches, candle soot settled on the paint for centuries. Oil varnishes turned yellow and brown. Restorers sometimes remove the top layer and see a lighter palette underneath. This is how the Madonna of Montserrat in Catalonia darkened. Many city icons that never left smoky interiors darkened in the same way. There were also conscious decisions. Medieval masters sometimes went on dark wood, and painters chose warm, swarthy tones to emphasize antiquity and solemnity. In Poland, the image of Our Lady of Czestochowa has a dark face also due to subsequent restoration after damage. The result is the same. The gaze clings to the deep skin tone and the gold of the halo. The image stands out from the crowd. Why did such icons become miraculous? The effect of antiquity and endurance worked. The dark face looked like it had survived fires, wars, and thefts, which meant that the image had not abandoned people. Preachers recalled the line from the Song of Songs, "I am black, but comely," which was heard as a sign of humility and mystery. For a pilgrim, this was not a museum portrait, but a face with a biography of wounds and rescues. There is a version about the trace of ancient goddesses like Isis. It sounds bright, but there is no direct evidence. Historians are cautious. In most cases, the reason is earthly. Soot from candles, darkened varnish, dark wood, and then centuries of prayers, vows, and gratitude. This is how the glory of a miracle is born. There is another layer of meaning. The dark face is perceived as universal. It is easier for people of any nation and skin color to accept it. Therefore, it is precisely such images that became the centers of large pilgrimages in Montserrat, Czestochowa, Rocamadour, Einsiedeln. Flying houses, liquid blood, a meteorite that changed religion forever. And we're just getting started. Subscribe to the channel because it's going to get even better. Thanks for watching. Bye, everyone.